No Graves for the Forgotten by Ash Hatvik. Hundreds of years ago, the galaxy was in panic. The swarm was coming, a gigantic fleet of life destroyers who consumed countless galaxies for thousands of years were upon them. They arrived in a world, consumed and exterminated all life, then moved on, systematically eradicating everything and leaving behind barren rock in the void. The swarm was nothing short of nightmare fuel. Huge masses of something, certainly biological, certainly sentient, 100 per motherfucking cent evil, who just could take any form they wished, splitting up to create armies of insect like soldiers, hence their namesake, transform itself into gigantic organic ships without the need for oxygen or any other atmosphere. Then, one day, suddenly it vanished on the fringe of the Milky Way. Thousands of races cowering in fear sighed a sigh of relief, and many more of worry, because something had stopped the unstoppable. Something out there had stopped a galaxy killing fleet dead in its tracks, and left no sign of it.
The counselor has the floor. Please be silent.
The Galactic Council counted thousands of races, and it was rare for them to reach an agreement on anything.
Dear ambassadors, it has been 100 years today that a swarm vanished. It's clear at this point that something big has happened. It has been clear for years now that we must know what happened. As the Councillor of the Council, I hereby motion for the creation of a military investigation fleet, numbering no less than 2,000 warships, be sent to the last known location of this swarm to investigate what could be to stop, and, if necessary, to stop it shall it still exist.
5 standard days, 100 Earth hours. That's how long it took the Council to finally reach an agreement on whether or not the fleet should even be created. After no less than 230 threats of declaration of war, embargoes, and economic sanctions, did the Council finally reach a consensus that there was a need for clarity and, if necessary, action. Each race agreed to send a warship, ranging from the small, agile, and stealthy Kirlonian corvettes to Hilathi supercarrier bearing no less than 2,000 fighters to investigate the vanishing of the swarm. Such number of ships were a precaution of a still very galaxy, afraid to awaken a sleeping giant, be it the swarm or pretender. After another 100 days to assemble the fleet and a working chain of command, the destination was set. System 5-777-293-666. Never visited. Long range scanners indicated a single star orbited by 8 planets, a protoplanet, and an enormous asteroid ring, a real contender for galaxy's most mineral rich field. As thousands of hyperspace windows opened in the system, not a single sentient being was left alive to witness it. The fleet jumped in the orbit of the third planet, the obvious target of the swarm, as it was the only planet with an atmosphere capable of sustaining some form of life. It was a sight to behold. Monolithic masses of the swarm lay dead in orbit, easily kilometers in diameter each. Among them, crude satellites. It was a battlefield. And what shocked every sentient being on the fleet was that the swarm was positively dead. And below them, a planet bared the scars of it. A billion craters littered the surface of the seven continents, many nuclear. The surface was dark. No civilization was left, yet life flourished. It was a death world, and whoever inhabited it had, by all accounts, saved the galaxy. After scanning the surface, the fleet determined the ground investigations were in order, and thousands of marines dropped down enough men to subdue a planet into submission, marched down to find only animals and plants. Cities still stood in ruins, great buildings of steel and glass, little houses of mortar and bricks, all invariably bearing the scars of a war. War machines still stood, behemoths of thick metal and ceramic, primitive yet advanced weapons on them. Little creatures, four-legged, furry, agile, fled at the sight of the council troops, as very cranny and nook of the planet was investigated. Within days, the history of humanity had echoed in the far corners of the galaxy. A race, barely lifting itself out of its homeworld's biosphere, stood alone in the face of doom. A race of warriors, poets, artists, engineers, and geniuses, who the galaxy will never have the pleasure of meeting, looked at death itself square in the face and said no. The swarm arrived like it always did, surrounding a planet, taking out satellites and whatever ships and stations stood there. Then it descended. What the swarm didn't know was that it was facing a race so determined not to die that there was no surrender, no suicide, no easy pickings. Humans fought back, hard. In the fields, away from cities, the swarm absolutely obliterated them. But in the cities, humanity made its last stand. Records indicate that no human died without fighting, be it with their firearms, clubs, axes, swords, and even their bare fists if they sold their hide dearly. For every human skeleton found, thousands of swarm warriors were found. On the outskirts of their cities, massive walls were erected, and they held for years, it seems. In the fight, the humans detonated hundreds of fusion bombs, sacrificing themselves along with everything they held dear to spite the swarm, to harm it, to weaken it, to examine it. Surviving records found in the depths of military sites codenamed Area 51 indicated that humanity willingly killed itself to kill the swarm. The swarm incorporated and assimilated everything, including humans. They engineered a virus so strong, so potent, that not even the swarm could fight it, and they infected themselves with it, and let the swarm consume them. The swarm died, and humanity died as well. The disease spread like wildfire, killing the swarm and humanity alike. An image stands out today in the archives of the Council. It is without a stretch of a doubt the most viewed image to ever be recorded. A human soldier in power armor, rifle in hand, and a swarm warrior's head in the other, stuck in an eternal fight, instantly glassed and immortalized in the detonation of a prototype weapon that literally turned everything into stone. On the wall that appears to be subterranean bunker to the crude drawing, obviously not part of the original design, that read, "There are no graves for the forgotten. The galaxy as a whole will not forget humanity."